So what does 2010 look like for Ping An? Well, this morning we have Ping An's president, Louis Cheung, joining us live from our Shanghai bureau. Good morning to you, Louis. A tenfold increase in your 2009 profit looks pretty optimistic, mostly boosted by those investment gains. Now, Ping An is remaining cautious, though, on the stock market for this year.
Well, good morning. We are positive about the economic situation in China, and will continue on this very solid recovery path. But given that the global economic situation is still not without uncertainty, we would remain conservative in our investments.
Okay, and what about tightening, Louis, in China at this point? Of course, we had the huge numbers coming out for first quarter GDP, 11.9%. In your views, do you think the Chinese economy is overheating here?
Well, I think the recent so-called tightening measures have been well within expectation. In the slightly longer term, we would expect some more inflation pressure to come in, and therefore we should be naturally entering a rising interest rate cycle. But of course, given the current situation, not only in China but also globally, to maintain economic growth momentum, we would be naturally also seeing some delay in this rising interest rate cycle playing out.
Mm-hmm. What sort of delays, Louis? You're not expecting one, say, in Q3 sometime?
Well, I don't think I can make an accurate prediction here, but in terms of positioning us for taking full advantage of a rising bond yield cycle, we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, actually, we had your Deputy Chief Investment Officer, Chen Dexian, saying that Ping An will boost its holdings of debt, such as corporate bonds, because of fears of inflation coming down the pipeline, higher interest rates as well. Let me just ask you about inflation. We're talking about insurance, so it's inflation in China. Some are predicting it'll surpass a 3% target that the government has set. How does Ping An see it?
Well, we do see a lot of good growth momentum in the economy, and in order to sustain a relatively high growth rate, around 8% relative to the rest of the world, some inflation pressure should be part of it, and it should come in naturally. But we're not expecting anything more than what we have seen in the last 10 years.
Okay, so it could reach 6% then, because we've seen that target breach during the height of 2007 when China's stock market hit record highs.
Well, I think the policies are well in place in order to continue the growth momentum and at the same time keep inflation very much in check. Right now, we're not seeing any particular pressure one way or another to disrupt the current situation.
Okay, well, let me just ask you this, because you seem pretty confident in the government's measures to keep things under control and in check on the mainland. We've been hearing a lot of talk about bubbles, people thinking that there are bubbles persisting in the Chinese economy. The latest one to voice in here was Jim Chanas, of course, the hedge fund manager, who says China's on a treadmill to hell, Louis, and he says that the property bubble is going to burst and drag down the rest of the economy. What do you think when you hear these sort of comments?
Well, remember that we're still recovering from a major crisis back in 2008, and China, no doubt, has done a very good job, especially compared to the rest of the world, to get the economy back on a recovery track and to maintain a growth momentum while keeping other measures in place to prevent any major disruption. And so far, what we have seen have been very positive indeed. And
okay, very
I have
positive.
No doubt that we will continue.
Okay, so if that's the case, let me just ask you about the property sector from your perspective, from Ping An's perspective, because you saw a lot of house insurance policies. Have you seen that, basically surging and on the rise as we've seen with the property prices in recent years?
Well, no doubt we've seen a lot of movements in property prices, but in the longer term, in terms of demographic change and continued urbanization process, especially in the coastal urban areas, we are positive in the medium to long term about increasing our investments and exposure to the real estate market.
Okay, so it sounds like you're still pretty optimistic on the property market, in fact, seeing more gains in the future, Louis. Let me just ask you, though, what about this debate that people think that China needs to revalue its currency, A, to basically bring down the overheating in the economy, and B, to basically help with its trade policies and slow down a lot of the voices and the complaints that we've been hearing from the U.S. side?
Well, on the one hand, there is indeed no hurry for China to do anything right now in terms of major changes to the currency policy. On the other hand, compared to 10 to 20 years ago, the Chinese economy now is much more connected to the rest of the world and is indeed affecting other parts of the world. And therefore, naturally, China would be looking more than before at its potential influences on other parts of the global economy in determining its own currency policy. So it's just a natural progression.
Okay, it's a natural progression, but would Ping An benefit from, say, an RMB revaluation, considering Ping An makes a lot of the money domestically in China?
We will remain very focused on the Chinese market, and therefore we don't expect any material impact to our business.
Okay, but say your material expectations then from RMB appreciation, has that been factored into Ping An's, I guess, corporate strategy this year?
I don't think we're making any prediction one way or another here. We are seeing a lot of growth momentum in our business across the line. Our core insurance businesses are growing very well indeed, and we are putting more resources into building out our banking franchise as well as our securities and trust and asset management businesses. We're seeing very positive momentum continuing well from last year into this year.
Okay, well, Louis, I got one more question for you, because recently we had a Prudential in the UK announcing that it's going to buy up AIA for $35.5 billion. Now, Ping An also made an acquisition during the height of the financial crisis, some say wrongly, buying into Fortis Bank. What sort of advice do you have for Prudential buying an international asset and being in a new market that they're not exactly the dominant player in?
Well, I guess instead of giving any suggestions to them, I would say that I remain very positive about the Asian market as a whole for insurance in terms of growth and profitability levels. And therefore, we will be naturally seeing more efforts in terms of global companies expanding their presence in Asia.
All right, Louis, thank you so much for your time this morning. Enjoy yourself in Shanghai. That's Louis Cheung, president of Ping An Insurance.